Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 5, Episode 12, The Begotten. This episode aired January 27th, 1997. It looks like there were a few weeks of no episodes since the last episode aired January 6th, 1997, and now it's the 27th. But anyway, we didn't take any time off since we just recorded last week's episode a few days ago, so we're just marching on.
No, we don't take time off.
We don't take time off.
The podcast waits for no one.
That's right. And since we just recorded the previous episode, I vividly remember the darkness and the light. Do you have anything to add to that one?
No, it was perfect. Which can't be said for the poetry in it.
That's true. The poetry at the end was a little like, what? Well, this episode has some lightness to it that episode was definitely missing. But
yes.
At least it's not a total throwaway like the Risa nonsense or anything like that.
No, that was a good episode. I liked the horror element of it and the suspense. I thought that worked.
I think what I'm finding is I don't mind the quirky episodes or I don't mind the hand-wavy stuff. As long as we're not insulting women or like a whole group of people, I can usually enjoy an episode.
Right.
Well, should we start talking about this one?
I think we should.
In the cold open, Odo arrives in the infirmary with a bad back. He said it happened when he got out of bed. Welcome to old age, dude. I remember pulling a neck muscle while sleeping once. I woke up like crying and you were going, what is happening? Anyway, Odo is convinced he has Alvanian spine mites and he's going to suffer from this forever. But Bashir is like, pinch nerve, you're fine.
I have the feeling Odo might be one of those people who goes on Google and then finds all the problems.
Puts in his symptoms.
And yeah, it's fatal.
But it kind of makes sense that he would go from being pretty much invincible to feeling very fragile. So I can imagine he does Google every single thing that happens to him.
It's almost unfathomable, the change he would have to go through.
Yes.
All of a sudden, you go from, look, nothing ever hurts, to, wow, why does my back hurt? Why is this a problem? I guess it'd be like going from your late teens to suddenly being 50.
Yeah. But just going from no pain to any amount of pain would be pretty shocking.
Yeah.
Like even with all the chronic pain that I have, just even a person who is my age, if they didn't have that and then they suddenly inherited all that, it would be pretty shocking. Whereas I'm just like, it hurts again. But I mean, a pinched nerve is no walk in the park, but apparently in the 24th century, a simple hypospray fixes it. So all is well. The doctor tells Odo he needs to relax and loosen up his posture. I'm not sure bad posture has ever helped anyone's back, but sure. In comes Quark with something he bought that he thinks Odo will be interested in, and he pulls a small container from behind his back, which shocks Odo because it's a tiny changeling. Quark says, since it's dead, you can have it for only 5 slips of latinum. Odo says, it's not dead. And then Quark says, well, then 10. And then Odo says, it's sick. And Quark says, okay, 8.
Should have kept quiet there, Odo. Could have saved a few strips of latinum.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. And then Quark pushes some buttons on a pad and he puts Odo's thumb on it and leaves happy. Which, by the way, Odo, he didn't have thumbprints before. How did any of that ever work?
Yeah, that's a good point. The changelings gave him thumbprints?
I don't know. This is suspicious. But also, that's not enough security for money to change hands, just using somebody's thumbprint, like without their consent.
Well, that was before people proved that thumbprints are pretty useless for that.
Exactly.
They thought that was high tech.
I'm sure they did. But anyway, Bashir suggests that they put a security field around the changeling, but Odo says it's not necessary. It's not dangerous. It's just a baby.
Aww.
And we cue the theme song.
And Paramount starts its new show with Baby Changeling. I mean, Disney's made an entire series out of Baby Yoda.
A baby changing could be something cute and different every single episode.
Yeah.
It could be a fortune. New toys.
Oh, yeah, the merchandising alone.
It'd be a gold mine.
Yeah.
Well, after the theme song, Odo reminds Sisko that centuries ago, 100 changeling babies were sent out into the galaxy to learn about other races. Odo says this is what he looked like when he was first found. He says it'll grow in size as its shape-shifting abilities develop. Bashir says it was exposed to a massive amount of tetrion radiation, and he's going to try and purge the isotopes with an electrophoretic diffuser. Bashir has a lot of words like that in this episode.
That's some great technobabble coming from Bashir.
Yeah. Sisko asks if he's sure the baby poses no danger, and Odo says when he was found, he didn't even know he could shapeshift. Sisko wonders why the founder sent such helpless creatures out in space, and Odo says to find out if the species they encountered posed any threat.
Well, he said to gauge how they treat weak and vulnerable.
Right.
Which point I would, to use a quote said to the Bald Queen, I would question their motives.
Right?
Otherwise, why would the founders have a problem with the Federation, which is the embodiment of trying to help the weak, the vulnerable, to be non-aggressive? I think that's, again, maybe he got this from the founders when he was in the link. This is what the founders tell themselves.
Oh, totally. And also, as soon as Odo came back and tried to tell them that the solids weren't terrible, they were like, oh, you're not a changeling anymore. I don't think they're exactly open to anything. I'm not sure what the real motive of sending out the changeling babies was, but it wasn't that.
Yeah.
Maybe if you looked at it like they really were just trying to gauge the threat level, it makes sense.
Yes, if you look at it from that perspective, I would agree.
Yeah.
Advanced recon.
Yeah, with babies. That's great. It's like using babies as a human shield. Awesome.
I would see that potentially as a way of also exploiting other races. Let's say you do end up with a planet that has a lot of empathy and is caring. It might bring this changeling up. It might raise the changeling. You would see this as a caring and non-aggressive species. Much easier to conquer with the Jem'Hadar and bring into the Dominion.
Yeah, that's a good point. Odo says it will be months before the baby can take humanoid form. Sisko suggests the changeling could provide valuable information to Starfleet, and of course Odo wants to be allowed to work with it and help it learn how to shapeshift. Sisko thinks that's a great idea, but suggests contacting Dr. Moira, Odo's Bajoran dad, as we like to call him. Odo would prefer to do it alone, and Sisko says it's your call, but it's always nice to have someone around to help change the diapers. God, Sisko loves babies, doesn't he?
He really does. He really does. They could call Dr. Moira. I mean, he loves torturing changelings. This would be a great opportunity for him.
That's right. Bashir now says the purge of radioactive isotopes was almost 100% effective, and Odo says it certainly looks healthier as it has a less blue color now and is just goldish goop in a big beaker. Yeah. But Bashir points out a small degree of instability in its morphogenic matrix, but he hopes that will even itself out over time. Yeah. He also hoped Sisko's neurological problem would go away in Rapture. I'm starting to think he's a little lazy. I'm sure it'll go away.
Take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning.
Right. Well, anyway, Bashir says he's going to go check on Kira because she's in labor, and Odo has his own baby to look after now anyway.
He's a little bit distracted.
Yeah, he doesn't even notice.
He's like not hearing anything Bashir's telling him.
No, he's very focused on the changeling baby. After Bashir leaves, he asks the beaker if it's feeling better. He says, I know you can't understand a word I'm saying, but I also know you're aware of me. I was once like you. He says he spent months in a lab being prodded and poked by a scientist who didn't know he was a life form. He thought it was a mystery to unravel. It never occurred to him to just talk to me. Odo says, I was lost and alone, but it's not going to be that way with you. And then he carefully picks up the beaker and says, come on, I want to show you something. It's really very cute.
I find it funny, Auberginois having to act so many scenes with basically a beaker of goo.
Yeah, he's just acting with himself.
Yeah, colored gelatin.
I have to say he does a pretty good job at it. He's probably a little bit like Odo in this way. I mean, he just likes to be alone. I think he enjoyed having a lot of scenes to himself with just a cup of goo in front of him.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure that wasn't even there. Some of them, anyway. Some of the goo scenes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Some of them would be special effects, and others it was a jar of gelatin.
Yeah. Now we go to a very bizarre scene with a Bajoran midwife with some kind of ornate noisemaker in her hands, and the closed caption says, rhythmic scraping sounds.
I should have turned captions on.
Yeah. Well, she's doing that with her noisemaker, and Keiko's also making some noise with some noisemaker. And then at the end of this, Miles hits a little gong, and then we do that a few times before Miles sneezes and breaks the rhythm, and then we have to start over. Apparently, to give birth, a Bajoran woman must be totally relaxed, so this is part of the ritual to make that happen. But Miles can't stop talking and complaining that Shakaar hasn't arrived yet. But then he finally does arrive, and he breaks the spell of the calming ritual. But let me tell you, I don't care about anything else in this scene because Shakaar is back and the bangs are gone and the amazing hair has returned. And all hope for Bajor has returned.
That's my note. His wonderful hair is returned. Bajor is saved.
This poor actor.
Miles does seem very grumpy here.
I don't know. I guess he's just sort of cantankerous about stuff that doesn't interest him. And I think he finds this to just be irritating. Whereas Keiko is just trying so hard. I think she's probably missing out on this being something she would normally be handling.
Yeah.
And now she's just a bystander. So she's trying to, like, she knows all the rituals. She knows the words she's supposed to say.
Oh.
She has everything perfect. And then Miles is just like, ugh. And he keeps doing the gong wrong.
That's funny. You think that's something Keiko would do? She
Totally.
researched every piece of Bajoran procedure and tradition in this aspect.
Yeah, because there is a scene where she has some dialogue that she says that's not something she would normally say. And I'm quite sure it's because she has learned the ritual.
Yeah.
She's trying to show a lot of respect for Kira, who is doing a pretty big thing for her.
Do you think Miles would have reacted this way?
No, Miles is written ridiculously.
Yeah, and maybe let's go into over-analysis. Because I would expect Miles, who has always shown great respect for Kira,
yes,
that he would make the effort. If just for the fact, in a sense, it's kind of a duty. She's done this for him and Keiko, then suck it up, bang the gong.
I think that's a good way to look at it. And I know that a lot of these scenes and a lot of the way that Miles reacts in this episode irritates you. But I think if you look at it a little bit differently, which is that Miles has done everything for Kira. We had that stupid episode where he was massaging her legs and massaging her neck and going out of his way to make her more comfortable. But at the same time, he has to sort of put up with the fact that this baby is inside a military officer who has other priorities. Like, we didn't even talk about that in the last episode when she went off to try to get that guy who was killing all of her friends, right?
Yep.
So if you look at it that way, he has put pretty much everything that he has into it. But some of these little things are going to seem silly to him.
Interesting.
I think I might find them silly. I don't know that I would want to spend a lot of time learning these rituals and learning the dialogue and banging a gong. I think I would find it quite silly. I would probably do my best. Yeah. Just out of respect, like you said. But I don't find it super insulting that he's not really into this, that he's just like, oh my gosh, we've gone through so much to get here. Can we maybe just have the baby?
When you put it like that, with your perspective of how you would be in this situation, I can see the eye rolls from here.
Exactly. And it's not out of disrespect. It's just like, oh my God, okay, I've done everything. Can we just get to the next step?
I like that. Yeah, okay. I see your perspective there. That's a good one.
Well, now Odo has the changeling baby in a clear coffee mug. And he's sitting in the replimat talking to it in this like very calm, quiet voice. He's explaining that the station is his home and it's a very interesting place to live. He says, you can live here too, if you want. It's a fascinating place. And then Worf comes up to the table and asks why Odo is talking to his beverage. And Odo says, it's not a beverage, it's a changeling. And he walks off, which makes Worf look at his drink suspiciously. And I laughed out loud at that. It's just the stupid little scene, but it was really funny.
I wonder if Worf was worried that, okay, Odo as a solid has finally crossed the line. He's gone crazy.
Well, now Odo is in a lab, I think, with his new baby, and he pours the changeling goo out onto a tray and says, there's nothing like spreading yourself out after being cooped up in a jar. And he just keeps talking very gently to it, telling it that it can be anything it wants. And he's kind of circling the table, and the camera's like going around the table with him.
Yeah.
He's talking very calmly. And then Dr. Moira comes in. He's heard about the changeling, and he's come to help, in double quotes.
Odo looks so thrilled.
Oh, not happy.
He has this look on his face like, yeah, great.
Like, who invited this guy? Dr. Moira says it's much larger than Odo was when he was found. Odo really doesn't care about the scientific part of measuring it or monitoring it. Moira asks about Odo, though, saying he heard his people took away his ability to shapeshift. And Odo just says, I'm fine. His dad says, yeah, I knew you would say that, which irritates Odo even more.
Okay, if you were any kind of parent, wouldn't you at least attempt to talk to your kid after something like that happened?
He's got such a chip on his shoulder. He's like, oh, Odo should come to me. This guy, he's ridiculous.
Yeah, and this, how are you? I heard your people took away your ability to shift, the thing you loved the most.
Yes, I heard this devastating thing happen to you, but I just waited for you to call me. Okay.
But let's talk about me.
Oh my gosh. I can see we've looked at Dr. Moira in the very same way in this episode. Odo does not want his dad's help, and he does not want him here at all. He also doesn't want to hear about the best temperature for shape-shifting.
Yep.
He says that he'll look at Moira's reports, though Moira says he didn't keep extensive records. He always just wanted to move to the next test.
This guy is just a quack. Let's just face it.
He is.
He's just making stuff up on the fly.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a real researcher. He doesn't keep proper detailed records. I think he basically is a complete huckster, pretending to be a scientist.
Yeah, totally. If you're really a scientist, you're keeping track of everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And when Odo sort of scoffs at the word tests, Moira is like, oh, poor baby.
Yeah.
He says, you still resent the things I did that prompted you to shapeshift. And he says, I hope you would have gotten over that by now. I'm so disappointed in you.
Wow. This scene is just fascinating.
Yeah.
When Odo got annoyed with him, Moira says, oh, I see you still have trouble controlling your temper.
He's horrible.
This guy he's as bad as Odo's people.
Yeah.
Has anybody actually checked Moira to see if he's a changeling?
Oh, yeah, poke him, see if he shapeshifts.
I think Moira and the founder woman, they're the same person.
Yeah, it's weird. They give him like these real fatherly type statements so that you think he was really just acting as a father to help Odo mature and that he wasn't trying to do anything particularly hurtful. And then he's disappointed when Odo isn't grateful for his part in turning Odo into the changeling that he became. It's so ridiculous. He has such a chip on his shoulder.
Yep.
Odo is a life form. This is not a science experiment that you did that was successful or a thing that you created. I don't know. His behavior is really terrible. And he's just endlessly heaping guilt on Odo. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. It's this guilt aspect. And then putting Odo down, saying, oh, poor Odo.
Ugh.
Just the sort of smugness of him as well.
No, it's bad. Yeah, it's really bad. You're right. He is a lot like the founder woman, especially the sort of poor Odo thing.
Yeah.
Which she would do all the time.
And then this, oh, you resent the things I did to you? Oh.
Get over it. I'm so disappointed you're not over my abuse.
Right.
God, he's terrible.
Oh. I beat you as a child so you could achieve higher.
Yeah, it's like Curzon. What was it? His charming abuse or whatever the nonsense was that they said about him.
Charmingly abusive.
Oh my God.
No, there's no charmingly abusive.
There's no charm in abuse.
So in many ways, Moira exhibits the behavior of an absolute ideal parent.
Okay.
Before I turn this into a complete overanalysis section.
Yeah.
Do you think Moira has any concept he's doing anything wrong? Or is he so narrow-minded that everything is somebody else's fault? In this case, Odo's.
I think it's interesting that everybody looks at this guy as being Odo's dad and as him as having raised Odo. And they think Odo is sort of cantankerous. He's not very empathetic. Meanwhile, this guy is so cantankerous and not very empathetic. I mean, they're kind of the same.
Yeah.
So I think he is completely oblivious to his part in any of the negative things that have come from Odo, and he wants to blame everybody else. I think it's a lack of emotional intelligence. It's also I don't know, sometimes you run into these people where nothing is my fault.
Oh, yes.
And I'm a genius, and I can't believe you don't just appreciate my genius. Instead, all you do is complain about me not being nice. Meanwhile, I'm a genius. I mean, I have absolutely worked with these people.
Oh, yeah.
And they're horrible, and you just want them out of your life. So I totally relate to the way Odo feels in this situation. At the same time, Odo is ridiculous and childish in many ways and in many cases. Not so much in these later seasons as he was in the early seasons.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think the guy understands at all that what he did was not right.
Oh, agreed.
I mean, that comes out kind of in this episode a little bit, but I feel like we already had this lesson in that episode, The Alternate. So we've reverted and we're sort of starting over, but I don't think this guy's aware.
I would agree. I think he is just so focused. He doesn't see anything outside his world.
Yeah. I think he's the ends justify all of the means kind of person.
Yeah.
Which maybe they're always trying to convince us on television that that's how scientists are. But I don't think that's how every scientist is.
He isn't really a scientist. He's just a huckster.
Well, back in the birthing room, Kira has a sudden cramp, and the midwife says, "You shouldn't be feeling any pain," which must have been quite funny for the actress, Nana Visitor, who just gave birth in real life. So she's probably like, I shouldn't be feeling any pain. Anyway, the midwife says, "You're not going to have the baby today. You were in labor too long." She wasn't able to fully relax, so it could take a few more days or even weeks. And Kira is like, great.
She is not happy about the weeks idea.
No, and then the midwife scolds Shakaar for being late and tells Miles to practice the gong. Well, now Odo is telling the changeling about different shapes, starting with a sphere. But he can't get the goo to take on any of these shapes. And then we have a montage of different shaped containers that he dumps the goo into, all while keeping a gentle tone to his voice describing the shapes.
Meanwhile, Moira is watching this, clearly irritated by Odo's approach.
Yeah, rolling his eyes.
I'm sure he wants to get straight to electrocuting it.
Yes.
And this is another way he's undermining Odo.
Yes.
Rolling his eyes.
Uh-huh. Childish.
Basically looking on disapprovingly.
Yes.
What a great parent.
Yes.
Nothing encourages your kid like belittling them and beating them.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Well, Moira says after a week it's only grown 17%. He says Odo grew a lot faster. But Odo says he's not trying to teach it tricks. He's trying to gain its confidence, which I think is the heart of Odo's distaste for Moira.
Yeah.
Moira says Odo's shapeshifting abilities were limited, and he also says maybe that's why his people were able to force him to take humanoid form.
Oh, more belittling.
Oh my gosh. And also, man, that could be your fault, not Odo's. This guy is so annoying.
Oh, Odo, you're just not good enough. Again. And then the kicker. I'm just trying to help.
Right.
He is an absolutely abusive individual.
Well, Odo is trying to look at this changeling as a life form, like as a person.
Yep.
And he feels the thing that bothered him the most was that he wasn't treated like a life form with feelings from the beginning. And so he's trying to do the opposite thing. And then he's got this guy hanging over his shoulder all the time, trying to push him to be less empathetic. It must be incredibly annoying. I can't believe he didn't kick him out.
Right.
Moira says at first he didn't even know that Odo was a life form, but once he discovered he was sentient, the Cardassians started applying pressure to him to produce results. He says, "My technique worked." And then they trade insults, with Moira saying, "If it wasn't for me, you'd be sitting on a shelf somewhere in a beaker labeled unknown sample." And Odo says, "If it wasn't for me, you'd be nobody."
At least Odo did throw something back at him.
Yes. While they're shouting at each other, Sisko comes in and stands quietly behind them until they notice. He says Starfleet Command is looking for daily reports, but if they don't make some progress, Starfleet might interfere. And when he leaves, Moira says, "Maybe now you understand the pressure I was going through," which is not the same thing.
Right. Let's address this.
Yep.
This changeling isn't property. It's not Starfleet's to just take away from Odo, who's the only non-murderous changeling that they've actually encountered.
Yeah.
As we know from the Inside Odo's Mind episode, he's not truly 100% solid. There's still a little bit of that changeling in there. I don't see how they have any ethical footing to stand on of saying, oh yeah, we're going to take him away from Odo, it's our property.
I agree, especially since Odo's not in Starfleet.
Yeah.
So it's not like he signed some document that said, any life form I find is property of the Federation. No.
Sentient life form.
Yeah.
Odo could present the following to Sisko. You take this changeling away, I'm going back through the wormhole to the Founders and saying, okay, I was wrong, you were right, all solids need to die, let's go wipe them out.
Well, you always go from 0 to nuclear, but in that episode where they found the Jem'Hadar baby, that one made sense.
Yeah.
Because that thing was quickly evolving into a very dangerous Jem'Hadar that Odo could not control. And also, it wasn't Odo's. They found it on the station.
And it was genetically modified by the Founders.
Right.
So I think
it was different.
That does put it in a very different situation.
That makes more sense to me. In this particular case, we've had this conversation before about the jurisdiction of Starfleet.
Yeah.
Like, did Starfleet have any jurisdiction over that Cardassian kid in the Cardassians episode?
Right.
No. And why would they have it here? I do understand why Moira might have been pressured by the Cardassians during the occupation to produce results and for them to try to control Odo or whatever they called him at the time.
They're a fascist regime who probably want to weaponize it.
That makes total sense. This
Yep.
doesn't make sense, this part about Starfleet thinking that they were going to come and interfere. I could see him saying something like, a bunch of Starfleet scientists might turn up and start interfering and trying to be a part of it. That I would get.
Yeah.
But this was like a forced thing where they wanted us in the story to see that Odo had the same pressure that Moira had, and so then he would start acting the same way.
Yeah.
I think that was a little bit clunky, yeah.
I saw it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
In that I think it allowed Moira, the little rat that he is, to use this to pressure Odo into using his torture techniques. If he wasn't such a lowlife, he should have been defending Odo's approach to Sisko. He'd be pressuring Sisko using his influence, because he'd been working with Starfleet, to support Odo.
I see. But
if you're a self-aggrandizing narcissist, then, of course, it's going to be about getting what you want.
Okay. No, that's a good way to look at it. So now we try some of Moira's old equipment where they make the table uncomfortable by injecting some, I don't know, small shocks, maybe, to get the changeling to move. Odo is hesitant, but Moira says without discomfort, the changeling will be perfectly comfortable to remain in its gelatinous state. There's something to that. I understand what he was saying. But at the same time, I don't want to hurt the thing, so I know it's weird.
Well, Moira does say, spare the rod, spoil the child. And there it is, the smug abuser hiding behind platitudes. He's enjoying this.
Yeah. I think Odo's way would probably have eventually worked. It may have just taken months.
Yeah.
And Odo was perfectly ready to wait months and let it slowly happen rather than cause some harm, even if the harm is tiny or it's discomfort, not pain.
Yeah.
He would have waited forever for the shapeshifter to decide it was ready to shapeshift.
Yeah, the problem is Moira had no proof that Odo's approach wouldn't work.
No, he didn't.
He had no interest, really, I think, in...
He had no interest. Yeah, he had no interest. You got to go fast.
Helping Odo show that would work, yeah.
Well, Odo finally does turn it on, and the changeling moves to the center of the tray, which makes Odo really excited. And Moira says, "Oh, I smiled the first time you did that too. Little did I know you would end up hating me for it."
There is no level of guilt tripping that this guy will not stoop to.
I hate this guy more than I hate Kai Wynn. He's horrible.
Kai Wynn's evil is more grandiose and on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
This guy is kind of like just a petty torturer.
This is more insidious.
Yeah.
And at the same time, he's literally proving Odo's point about him.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. It's just awful. Well, now Shakaar walks in on Miles rubbing Kira's legs and offers to take over. And then the two of them argue about rubbing her legs while Kira tries to get their attention that the baby is coming. And then they fight over helping her off the table. And it's just a bunch of silly stuff here.
Yeah, my notes here say, more stupid clowning with Miles and Shakaar.
They don't know how to deal with this at all, so they just make them act like morons. But you've said in the past that the people writing Star Trek at this point in time, they're from an older generation even at that time, where they're from the Vietnam War era, etc. This was a time where the guys were outside of the birthing rooms smoking cigars. They weren't a part of it. So I almost feel like you talk about it being like from a bad sitcom. I almost feel like it's sort of the next level, which is an old school sort of patriarchy problem. More than it is, it's bad sitcom writing. This was their view of the world.
I can see that as an interpretation, yes.
Well, the experiments continue in the lab, and things are finally starting to go well. But Odo and his dad continue to bicker. Moira is bitter that Odo left him and went out on his own, which is absolutely ridiculous.
More abuse and emotional guilt from Moira.
And after this line, the baby changeling shapeshifts into a sort of snake-like thing, partially mimicking Odo's face before falling back into a jello mold shape. And Odo and Moira are just thrilled at this development.
That was really good. And the way it sort of roughly mimics Odo's face. It shows that it is definitely responding to Odo.
I read that it was basically a guy with his arm in a sock.
Really?
Yeah, that was a really low budget effect that they did, but that it worked really effectively.
No.
Yeah, it says that on Memory Alpha.
That looked like CGI. I don't believe it.
Okay.
I'm going to have to look that up. I might have to research that further.
All right. Well, Odo and Moira run to the security office and they're both just giddy. Odo can't wait until he can communicate with the changeling. Moira says it's developing far faster than Odo did, and he says Odo's method of communicating seems to have been sound. Oh, shocker. He says you formed a connection.
Amazingly, he's conceding that maybe Odo had a point.
Maybe. They have a little moment of understanding and respect for each other, which is the first time in this episode. And then Odo orders some champagne from the replicator so they can celebrate. And everyone is definitely too happy for Star Trek.
Yeah, based on everything that's happened to this point, this scene is so weird. Because he says to Moira, I'd be a lump of organic residue if it wasn't for you. It's like, what? I think Moira has finally accomplished his goal with Odo of the victim is thanking the abuser.
Yeah, I agree. It's not earned. The scene is not earned.
Absolutely agreed.
Back to the birthing room and the annoying scraping and banging.
Ding.
Shakaar tries to stop Miles from looking at Kira's private parts, and then Kira kicks them both out of the room for bickering.
More Miles and Shakaar clowning.
I'm really surprised that this is what they brought this actor back for. I mean, he could have had more interesting scenes in the Rapture episode or even in the previous episode about the Cardassian trying to kill Kira. I mean, he's less concerned about that than he is about Miles.
Agreed. And I would also expect the character to be a little worried about the potential medical side effects because it's not a Bajoran baby.
No.
So is there danger to Kira? There's all sorts of things you'd be concerned about.
Yeah.
And it's clowning.
Very surface and weird, this whole B story.
Yeah.
Now we go to Quark's, and the bar is closed, but Odo is behind the bar helping himself to a drink. Quark says, you're in a good mood, so you must be here to arrest me.
Odo is in a shockingly good mood.
Yeah, Odo kind of laughs in his weird Odo way. It seems that he's just happy and he's here to celebrate. Quark says, if you're happy, there's something very wrong with the world. The center cannot hold, which is a great line.
Oh, yes, I did like Quark's reaction. He's looking for the angle here, and it's blowing his mind.
But note that he went to Quark to celebrate. He didn't go to Sisko, who loves babies.
That's true.
He didn't go to Kira, who I guess is busy. He went to Quark.
You know, if Quark was really as sharp a Ferengi as he thinks he is, he would realize this could be that rule of acquisition. Once in a while, declare peace with your enemies. It'll confuse them.
Right. Odo says the changeling baby has changed his life. Having children seemed like too much trouble, but now he couldn't be happier. He'd come to accept that he'd have no more contact with his people, but then this little ball of goo changed everything. It's like experiencing what it is to be a changeling again.
Aw.
But you can't be happy for too long on TV, and one of Dr. Bashir's monitoring alerts calls Odo to say the baby changeling is displaying biomimetic fluctuations beyond stated parameters, and Odo runs out.
Yeah, it's like Happy Kira. Something's gonna go wrong.
Yeah. We go to the lab and Moira says the baby's morphogenic matrix is destabilizing. In other words, it's dying. This hits Odo very hard.
Yep.
We move to sickbay and Bashir says its life signs are fading. The radiation must have damaged it in a way that he couldn't detect. I think we've established that Bashir has no idea how to treat changelings.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not people, so maybe we should have called Dax for help instead of Bashir.
Interesting point. Yeah. The science officer might have just as much of an idea as a doctor if Bashir doesn't understand how it works at a basic level.
And by the way, there is no Dax at all in this episode. I think I read this is the first episode that she didn't appear in. Dr. Moira suggests some things that they could try, and Odo is desperate for anything to help. So Dr. Moira suggests that Odo wait outside while they work.
Why does he have to wait outside? Is this just the thing they do in cheesy medical drama writing?
Well, he's kind of getting in the way and he's panicking. I think you want the panicking person to stand outside so you can make good decisions.
Okay. I'll kind of agree with that. I would say I think that was kind of harsh if your kid's dying. But then again, Moira is all about emotional abuse, so that would make sense.
Yes, emotional disconnection. Well, back with Kira, the baby starts to come, and Kira says the dudes can come back in if they behave. Though they can't even get through the door without fighting. It's so stupid.
Yeah, they should play some silly upbeat music.
Well, the baby seems to just magically appear from here with no trouble.
That's what happens with Bajorans.
Which I imagine women everywhere are like, wow, how do I get that?
That's just Bajorans, I think.
Obviously, yeah.
Well, clearly birth is very easy for Bajoran women.
That's why they've been around for so long.
Yeah.
Back in the infirmary, the doctor tells Odo he's sorry. He can't save the changeling. And Odo takes it in his hands and asks it not to die.
Oh,
And he says, there's so much I wanted to teach you. But then it kind of disappears into Odo's hands and everyone is like, where did it go?
yeah, it like dissolves as he's holding it.
Yes. And I thought it was just turning to dust, like
Yeah.
in the ship.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But then it just completely disappeared. And then Odo sort of convulses a bit. And this is when I cheered because that's right. The changeling baby absorbed into Odo and Odo's a changeling again.
Yes.
He heads out onto the promenade and turns into a hawk, leaving his uniform behind on the floor, and he flies away.
Circles the promenade and then craps on Dr. Moira's head.
At the beginning of this show, the first season,
Yeah.
I would have never thought I would have cared about Odo or anything that happens to him. But I was really excited by this scene. First of all, didn't see it coming. I was
That's
totally surprised.
awesome.
You didn't give it away.
Yep.
Nobody spoiled it for me because things keep getting spoiled for me. But I did not know this was going to happen in this episode. I was really shocked and I was really excited about it.
Yeah, you have no idea how hard it is me not telling you. Don't worry, Odo gets his powers back. He'll be okay.
I knew he'd get his powers back. Come on. It's television.
It's such an oddly touching scene when
Yes.
really it's Odo holding a handful of goo.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, it must be a tough acting job considering he probably wasn't actually holding anything.
Yeah, there's probably nothing there. It is a very touching scene considering that we have no connection to the thing.
Yes.
Because it never looks like anything. It doesn't communicate. There's no part of it that is real to us.
Yeah.
But yet, it is super touching to see it because Odo wanted it to be a thing so much. And also he expressed how this was a connection to him being a changeling. And we know that
Right.
that's tearing him apart and he misses it so much. He'd given up hope that he was going to have contact with his people again. And now he had this opportunity. And then it went from maybe the worst despair he's had to feel
Yes.
to an elation of the only thing that brought him joy of being a changeling. So it's a great scene.
Oh, agreed. Agreed.
Or maybe I read a few too many things into it. but it
No,
worked for me.
I would not at all. I think that's exactly right. That sums this thing up. You go from Odo from the deepest despair to getting back that thing that was taken from him.
Yes. Well, now Shakaar is leaving, and he suggests that Kira take some leave of her own. But Kira isn't quite ready to leave the baby behind. And then they announce that the shuttle to Bashir is departing, and I laughed out loud because this is the first time ever we've had an announcement like we're at an airport.
Well, you pointed out a few weeks ago there looked like there was some baggage carts.
Yes, and now we have announcements of flights. But also, would they be making public announcements about a flight that the president of Bashir is going to be on a week after a terrorist attack?
The president of Bashir
I
is
don't
going to
think
be
so.
on this shuttle at this time. Just so everybody knows.
Yeah, it's a little hand wavy.
That's pretty funny.
Well, then we go to Odo and his dad. Moira asks how it feels to be himself again, and Odo just wishes it hadn't happened the way it did, of course. Moira says, think of it as a gift, something the changeling wanted you to have. And Odo says he finally understands what his dad went through when he left. They agree to stay in touch, but I feel like we had this conversation before and they agreed to stay in touch and it never happened.
Right.
But anyway, they have an awkward hug and Moira heads out.
Yeah.
I guess we're supposed to think here that the son has learned to respect what the father went through, and I don't know.
I'll go back to my earlier statement. It's the abuser's journey is complete. The victim sees him as his savior.
Oh, great. That's great.
Yeah, Moira can be very smug about it.
Well, Kira and Odo run into each other here, and they decide to take a walk. The O'Briens are having a party for the baby, but she's not in a party mood. She says she just wants to hold that baby and never let it go. Oh.
Wow.
And Odo can relate, and they walk off together. This was a big day for these two people.
Yeah.
The end. Well, we have been poking and analyzing as we go, but I assume you have more to say.
I guess they hint at the end there with Kira, and I read about this, and I know it's come up in the past, of the difficulty of surrogates to give up the baby, even when they have no direct biological involvement with the child.
Right. You still carried it.
Yeah. They didn't expand upon it, but it was sort of, if you ever read about it, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I read that originally Kira's character was supposed to just be happy to be able to give the baby to the O'Briens,
Yeah.
and that Nana Visitor didn't think that was quite right.
Oh,
and so they
that's
wrote
good.
that last scene in to show that she was feeling sad about it.
Oh, that was a good choice. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I think from the writer's perspective, they just created that story to get through her pregnancy, and now to them, well, that's done.
Right.
We'll make a little comedic ending and move on. No big deal.
Yeah, play a little happy tune and the end.
Exactly.
I think that fits with the
Exactly.
writing, yeah.
Yep.
Now, well, I think I'll start with the one I'm most interested in. So, Dr. Moira's behavior. I feel it was almost an excuse for being an abusive, narcissistic parent. Was this one of the writers trying to excuse how they behave towards their children?
I don't know. I just kept feeling like it was such an oversimplification of fatherhood, and maybe they were dealing with the conflicts with their own fathers. It's a good question.
I found it really sort of unsettling. And it's almost like I had to beat you and abuse you because it made you a better person.
It's not satisfying.
Exactly. It felt like too much like we're all reconciled now. It's like, oh, you forgot everything that happened in the past, including the way he behaves towards you in just this episode, just in what's going on. There was no payoff there.
Yeah.
As you would say, this was not earned, and it was not even built up to.
Yeah, I think they could have stretched this out over several episodes.
Yeah.
Even if it had been sort of a side story for a couple of episodes and not a main focus. That would have made sense. And maybe they would do that today in a show that wasn't episodic.
Oh, that's true. Right. There was no learning from Moira that any of the things he did were wrong or even relatively unethical. It doesn't matter if you were pressured by the Cardassians. The things you still did were wrong.
All he really said was that, Odo's technique was proving that it worked. That was essentially all he said. That's all he conceded. He didn't concede anything else.
Right. Agreed.
But if Odo hadn't built up that relationship or wasn't treating it the way that he treated it, it might not have absorbed itself into him.
Very good point. So I think
Odo's technique was very positive in the end for himself.
Oh, yeah.
And for the short life of the baby changeling.
Oh.
But, the founders are going to yell at him because he probably could have just brought it back to the Great Link, and maybe they could have saved it.
Oh, interesting take there. Could they have saved that changeling? Well, they're kind of jerks, so they would probably be awful to him.
Yeah, but they probably could have cured it.
I didn't think of that, actually. I guess this is why we talk about it.
This is why we talk about it,
Okay, next thing. Did this remind you of Data's daughter Lal from The Offspring?
No.
Really?
Actually, not even a little bit.
Yeah.
That episode makes me cry my eyes out.
A friend for Worf.
When she says, "Thank you for my life," that kills me every time.
Oh, that's true. It was a much more positive
Much more emotional episode, yeah. And it was so much more about Data's growth.
Yeah.
And his whole thing about wanting to be a human. This wasn't quite like that. This was more about Odo's, almost more about his own childhood and his regrets from it and how he didn't want somebody else to suffer in the same way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I very much felt that. Right.
I guess I didn't, I see, now that you mention it, I see the connections or the parallels, I guess. But in general, no, it did not remind me of that story because the emotional elements were so different. Yeah. There's really only a handful of stories. We just keep changing everything a little bit. As we're seeing in Strange New Worlds.
Next thing.
Yeah.
Did the electrocuting of the changeling trigger the collapse of its morphogenic matrix? Did what Moira was doing eventually cause it to die?
Oh my God. I hope not. Bashir mentioned at the beginning, because he set up these alerts. Yeah. And like I said, he was like, I'm sure it'll be fine. So,
I'm not a very good doctor with these things.
I hope not, is my answer.
My headcanon worries that it was that.
Oh my God. Then Odo would just beat himself up about it forever.
Yeah, I think just blow up Moira's shuttle in a tragic accident.
No, Shakaar's on that shuttle.
Oh, that's a good point. Maybe he was. Yeah, in that case, tragic decompression of Moira's quarters.
You can't sacrifice Shakaar now that his hair is right.
That's true. He is the savior of all Bajor with that hair.
Yeah.
Okay, next thing.
You're killing me with these. What other awful thing are you going to say now?
Oh, yeah, this one isn't bad.
Okay.
Did the changeling know that Odo was actually kindred? Did it actually understand what Odo was telling it? I'm thinking maybe at a base level, is there some of
Yeah.
that great link connection? Because remember, there was that telepathic link Odo had with the others. Was that changeling picking that up? Because why would, if Odo was just another human or solid, would it even be able to absorb into Odo and fix what the founders did? The other side of that is, did that changeling detect that Odo was broken? That it just saw it as there was something wrong with Odo, and it made an attempt to fix him. So it was dying, but it sacrificed itself to save another changeling.
Well, Odo talked about some things that he was doing to Moira during those early experimental phases.
Yeah.
Where he couldn't really communicate or wasn't communicating that he was just trying to do something to be annoying, but he was aware of what he was doing.
Right.
So if we believe that, then we should believe that this changeling would have been aware by this point, at least enough to know that somebody was caring for him and treating him well and trying to help.
Yeah.
If we believe that, then yes, I think the changeling could have been aware and could have been trying to help Odo.
Yeah.
And if he still had that telepathic connection that Odo wasn't completely aware of from things past, I think was that episode where we learned that.
Yeah.
Then the changeling baby may have been able to grasp something when touching Odo's skin.
Oh.
And maybe that at that moment, because before that, he was dumping him from beaker to beaker and shape. He wasn't touching it.
Oh, I didn't notice that. You're
But
right. Yeah.
when it was in his hand, maybe they did have a connection.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, just like in the Great Link, they connected to each other and it sort of morphed into Odo to fix him.
Okay. Yeah. I thought that the changeling understood Odo at some kind of level. So it knew Odo was a kindred spirit.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. And jumping into headcanon, I did think that its final act was to save Odo.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or unbreak Odo.
Unbreak Odo, yeah.
This may be the final one.
Okay.
So, and this is never covered in the series, and so it's not a spoiler. We never find out why Odo is slightly different from the other changelings.
In terms of his abilities?
His empathy, the way he seems to think differently from them. This is my theory all along. Odo was exposed to some kind of radiation, which altered his matrix in a different but non-fatal way. This changeling was exposed to some kind of radiation, which unfortunately killed it in the end. So we've seen that this does happen to changelings, and I think this is why Odo is different. He's an evolution of his people.
I guess that's possible. That's a way to look at it. We're not introduced to any of the other babies or whatever the changelings are that they sent out.
Yeah.
So we don't know if they all came back like this. I don't know, and I don't know if we learn that. But I'm sure that what the story writers were trying to show was that because he was in a different environment, he came out differently.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good headcanon to think he may have been exposed to something that changed his evolution, made him more empathetic.
It's not unheard of, I think, is kind of my point.
I like to think that he became exposed to Star Trek.
Oh.
Meaning Starfleet.
Yeah, like those people on the
and
station.
That helped
They're
change him.
like astronauts on some kind of Star Trek.
Yeah. No, I think that's an interesting way to look at it.
Okay. And I think that finally wraps up my complaining about Dr. Moira for another episode.
He is awful. I totally grant you that. I don't have any other overanalysis. I think we talked about all of the points that I had already. So I'm just going to move to women in the future. I don't have a lot to say here. I'm sure women everywhere would like to know about this pain-free birthing experience that the Bajorans have managed to evolve into. I don't think the B story with Kira was really much of a story at all. I think they were just trying to wrap up this thing that they did to get through Nana Visitor's pregnancy.
Oh, okay.
So I don't really feel like there's a lot about it that it says about women in the future. I think the only thing I would say here is that I don't understand why Dax wasn't involved in trying to save the changeling baby, because it was more science than medical.
Yeah.
So I thought that was weird. And because she's always got a million ideas and she's always the one solving the problems, why wouldn't she have been involved? They could have at least said like she wasn't on the station or something if she was off on some mission.
Yeah.
But they don't even mention her. So I thought that was peculiar.
Why wouldn't you want her involved? Where was the science officer?
Yeah. But other than that, I don't have anything for women in the future, so I'm just going to move to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Okay, this one is a nightmare for me.
I bet.
I loved the Odo interaction with the changeling and how Odo wanted to correct the errors of the past and teach this person correctly.
Yeah.
And the dying changeling merging with Odo to restore his ability to shift. All that was just great. I just really don't like Mars being this ignorant laborer again. This sort of almost negative trope. And I think, you're right when you say maybe it's the writers going back to traditional gender roles from the 50s. It seems just kind of cruddy.
I really felt like that's what it was because they didn't really make Miles look stupid in this episode. I mean, they have in other episodes for sure, and I've been right with you. But in this one, I just felt like he was just going, I can't believe I have to sit here and bang this gong. And now I got to wait for this Shakaar guy and his hair. I really felt it was much more about that he was a little cantankerous more than he was ignorant.
Okay.
But it was weak and shallow. I don't deny it.
And Moira is a freaking sociopath. So this reconciliation at the end almost made me barf. He's a terrible person. How does nobody see this?
No, it wasn't earned.
He has so little empathy for Odo. This reconciliation just feels like, and we all lived happily ever after, the end. It feels hollow. It really didn't work.
It would really help if Odo could express himself better.
Yeah.
And instead of just being sort of cranky with him and defensive, if instead he just said, I'd like to give you the 5 bullet points of why we are not friends.
Well, it would actually, Moira would probably like that because it would give him more chances to belittle him. Oh, only 5? I could think of 10. I mean, this is the problem.
But I'm just saying, if Odo didn't take the bait and he rose above it, it would make more sense.
That's an interesting strategy.
Pretty much always my strategy.
So this is what makes this episode so hard.
I understand.
And Odo getting his abilities back at the end, that's great. I feel this storyline had so much more potential, but it felt so unsatisfying. I am giving it an absolutely solid neutral. It may, upon further reflection, get a begrudging thumbs up. The only thing I remember from this episode, and I know I've watched it several times, is just the Odo bit at the end. Everything else was pretty much a throwaway.
I liked it.
Wow.
I mean, thumbs up for me for what they did for Odo.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a clunky ride to get us here. I can't argue with you about that. But it surprised me, and I enjoyed watching Odo try and do things very differently from Moira.
Yes.
And being really empathetic and talking to it really sweetly and trying to explain, this is a great place to live. I live here. You could live here too. I just like the really measured way that he was doing that. He was trying to treat the baby changeling the way he wished he'd been treated.
All that stuff I thought was great.
That in general is a great lesson in life. I really like that. I also did like, even though I agree with you, the stuff with Moira wasn't earned, but they had to cram a lot into 46 minutes. I also liked that Odo did at the end accept that sometimes children do need a little push out of the nest in order to grow. So I think if you look at it that way, instead of getting sort of stuck in the nastiness of the father figure, I think it has a more positive impact. And I mean, you were sitting there. I really did cheer when I realized that Odo was going to get his, his shape-shifting abilities back. That really made me happy. The B story stuff was absolutely silly, but part of me was really laughing about that there was no pain and it was just this really relaxing birth, because I bet Nana Visitor thought that was great, right? Or maybe funny or ironic. And I'm sure she thought that that was kind of amusing. And so I was sort of laughing at the real life part of it. And I just looked at the stuff with Shakaar and Miles. It's just goofy. And they do goofy stuff on Star Trek all the time. I didn't find it as offensive as you did. I was looking at it in a totally different way.
I just feel very protective of Miles.
Well, I get that. And I'm very protective of the female characters. But even though there have been episodes where the female characters aren't always treated okay, I still, have given a lot of thumbs up in those scenarios as well. But I get it. When you feel like the character that you connect to or that you care about is treated badly, it's hard to give it a thumbs up. I do understand and respect your ability to do that.
Agreed. Well, that's good to know.
All right. Well, Does that wrap up Season 5, Episode 12?
I think that does wrap it up.
Come back next week for lucky Episode 13. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at rebingeit. You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube at rebingeit. You can check us out on talkthroughmedia.com, where you can leave feedback for individual episodes, and you can listen to all of the other Star Trek podcasts on our network.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.